Tech for Tech. Instead of only focusing on super high-end, very expensive time-lapse equipment, I thought I would focus on some things that are maybe more accessible and definitely more affordable for some people. So in today's video, I'm going to explain to you how to shoot good or great time-lapses on Samsung phones. Now I'm using the S21, which is still their flagship, I believe, which is not very affordable, but the principles in this video apply to all the other Samsung phones. I am also working on a video that explains which time-lapse apps I recommend in case you don't have a Samsung Android, you have another Android phone like a Google Pixel or whatever it is. So keep an eye out for that if you're not subscribed, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, roll the intro. In case you're new here, my name is Matthew van der Putte. I'm a time-lapse photographer living in London. His channel is about time-lapse travel and tutorials. First things first, the good stuff. We can now shoot time-lapses and hyperlapses, more on that later, in 4K Ultra HD resolution. You also still get the option to switch to Full HD, and we now get access to the ultra-wide lens for shooting as well as the normal main lens, which is really nice to be able to switch things up. There's a built-in stabilization option. It drops the resolution down to Full HD, but it is really useful when you're shooting hyperlapses on the move. More about how to shoot those later. As you can see, applying the stabilization does kind of crop in your field of view, so maybe you can look at this as a sort of a third lens. So you've got your ultra-wide, non-stabilized, you've got your main, non-stabilized, and then with the stabilization turned on, you have your main lens slightly cropped in, which gives you the impression of a longer focal length, which might be useful for some people. And then there is the night time-lapse feature, which you can select under the recording speeds. Now, this is very useful because it allows you to shoot holy grail shots with a gradual changing in light with no flickering, and it allows you to shoot, obviously, long exposures like car trails, etc. Now let's have a look at how I would shoot a time-lapse on a Samsung phone. First of all, open up the camera and then immediately switch to the oddly named hyperlapse mode. Let me know in the comments. A hyperlapse, in my opinion, is a niche within time-lapse. Not every time-lapse is a hyperlapse, but every hyperlapse is a time-lapse. So should this mode be renamed to time-lapse mode? I know what I'm thinking, but I want to know what you're thinking. Drop it in the comments below. Then you have to choose your recording speed, and this goes from automatic to 5x to 60x, and then it switches to night modes, 15x all the way to 45x. As I mentioned earlier, these night modes are great for night shots, obviously, but also they have a gradual change in exposure when you're shooting holy grail stuff, which leads to much less flickering than the daytime modes when you're shooting a sunset or a sunrise. Now, what do these X's mean? Normally, a time-lapse is set up with an interval in seconds. So you would have a 3-second interval, meaning one photo, then 3 seconds, then one photo, etc. The 5x, 15x, etc. translates to 5 seconds of recording is 1 second of footage. 15 seconds of recording is 1 second of footage. That's the 15x. It comes with these built-in guides that give you tips on what to use the modes for or what to use the speeds for, which is quite useful. But I highly recommend trying out the speeds for yourself. For example, sometimes clouds move really fast, sometimes they're really slow. The built-in tip gives you this mode for clouds, which might not be correct, so do some testing for yourself. Once you've got your recording speed chosen, obviously find yourself a composition, choose the ultra-wide lens or the normal lens, and hit record and then let it run. Make sure that your phone is stable and sturdy, and I use one of these things for that, or a clamp as well. This is just a cheap Joby rig that I always have with me. It's always in my camera bag or my backpack because it weighs nothing and it allows me to set this up for so many shots at a restaurant, at a cafe, wherever you are when you're traveling. It's a nice little thing to have. And then when it's running, you can just keep an eye on the timer, see how much footage you recorded, see what is happening on the screen. When you're done, you hit stop, and that's your time-lapse done. Now, extra tips. If you are shooting in the daytime mode and you're shooting clouds and there is flickering in the exposure caused by shadows moving across your frame, press and hold down on the screen, and that will enable the autofocus and the exposure lock. It also allows you to overexpose or underexpose depending on your scene and what you want, but the most useful thing here is that it actually locks in the exposure in the daytime time-lapse mode, which is great because that stops you from getting flickery footage. Now, this little circle isn't useful just for time-lapse. When you're shooting a hyperlapse, you can use that as an extra reference frame for when you're walking towards a building or walking sideways alongside a building. You can use that little circle to frame up a window, for example, to help you with the framing of your shot. Obviously, if you're going to shoot hyperlapses handheld, might be useful to turn on that stabilization mode, which, as I said earlier, does crop in your field of view quite a bit. And then something that came in a recent firmware upgrade as well, you can now adjust the speed of the file that you have recorded as well as the resolution with the built-in editor. So I would shoot clouds and I think they're too slow. You just go into the edit mode and select 2x speed and it just doubles the speed. You don't have to go into a separate app. It's now just built into your phone. One element of high quality time lapses that you often see is motion blur. Now there's not really an easy way to do motion blur on this, but I do have a little hack for you. If you want motion blur in your footage, for example, you're shooting traffic and you don't want it to look too jarring or jittery, instead of going in the time-lapse mode, just go in the video mode, record for, many minutes, which does drain your battery and your storage, etc. But with that video file, go into Premiere Pro or Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve, whatever it is that you use, speed up that video file and then enable frame blending. This will stack multiple frames on top of each other and give you the illusion that there is a motion blur. It's not perfect, it's not like the real thing, but it's better than jarry, jittery footage. Another really useful tip is to turn on the grid, which can help you with your composition, making sure it's nice and leveled. And that is my quick guide to how to shoot time lapses on a Samsung phone. Now, I have written an ebook called The Ultimate Time Lapse Guide, and it features over 75 different chapters about how to shoot on pro cameras, how to shoot on beginner cameras, how to shoot on phones, iPhones, Androids, GoPros, how to edit, how to prep, how to plan, how to shoot Astro, whatever it is that you need to know about time-lapse. Whatever I have in here is in this book. So check that book out if that is something that interests you. Besides that, if you have any other video suggestions or recommendations, please drop them in the comments, like, share, comment, subscribe, you know the drill. Hope you're well. We're moving from the Cloud Palace this week, which is very sad, but I'll talk more about that soon. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.